The very first lightsaber has already been created and it is awesome. But you may have noticed that it needs to have a tank of gas to power it, similar to the first lightsabers in Star Wars. In Star Wars, this wasn't very practical, so they found a way to condense it into the small hilt we see in the movies. This should be possible someday for us, except for the small teensy weensy little problem that it would break a fundamental law of physics. I'll tell you why on today's episode of Star Wars Nerds and Geeks. The way lightsabers work in Star Wars is really ingenious. This is how the book on lightsabers describes it. The energy cell unleashes its power through the primary crystal. A separate focusing crystal concentrates the released energy into a beam. This gem gives the beam its color and unique feel, characteristics that determine how it moves and vibrates. Once the energy is focused, it leads the handle through a positively charged energy lens inside the blade emitter. After about a meter, the beam bends back towards the hilt and passes through a negatively charged high-energy flux aperture, also in the blade emitter. To an observer, it looks like the blade simply stops growing, but this loop of energy creates the lightsaber's distinctive hum, as well as the spinning effect in the blade's movement, which makes the weapon difficult to control for those without training. As the beam or blade loops back into the handle, a superconductor channels the energy back into the power cell. As a result, the lightsaber is extremely energy efficient, uses all of its power at once, and yet never loses any. If you didn't catch it, basically the lightsaber's power goes up and out of the hilt, turns back down to go into the hilt, and just continuously loops again and again. It seems perfect. The lightsaber never needs to be charged since it's constantly feeding itself the power it needs. This has many problems, however, with the main one that I found being that it relies on perpetual motion. A perpetual motion machine is essentially a machine that is able to power itself to never stop moving. This, however, is impossible, as far as we know, because the energy will not be able to stay in this machine. Take this robot, for example. As it walks, it experiences friction. Friction turns energy into heat. Therefore, the robot's energy is slowly being turned into heat until there is no more energy left to power it. This applies to the beam of lightsaber too. As it loops, the beam has to be hitting air particles, which cause friction and therefore take away the energy of the beam. And when it's in the hilt of the lightsaber, it's probably hitting the sides, which takes away even more energy because of friction. And even if the lightsaber somehow causes a vacuum around the beam, which allows it not to hit anything as it loops, there will still be problems. When the lightsaber cuts something, it makes contact and therefore will experience friction and therefore would lose energy. The lightsaber emits light, a form of energy, so therefore it must lose energy. Lightsabers hum, and noise is energy, so therefore it must lose energy. If you haven't believed any of the examples I've given you, here is a rock solid one. Lightsabers are beams of energy which do not emit heat. However, metals cut by lightsabers are melted around the cut. This means that the beam of energy must have transferred so much energy into the metal that it melts. My point here is that there are examples upon examples of how lightsabers use up their energy. Yet the book says that a lightsaber never uses up any of its energy, and that all the energy simply cycles through the loop until the saber is deactivated. Those convicting points prove that the lightsaber breaks a law of physics, the first law of thermodynamics. This law states that energy cannot be created or destroyed, only converted from one form to another. Here's what that means. A protein bar is stored energy. When you eat that protein bar, the energy is transferred to you. You then use that energy to run around or click on this video or whatever it is that you want. That energy might be transferred into heat through friction, let's say, and on it goes, the energy just continually changing and changing. The amount of energy in the protein bar is the same as the amount of energy in the heat released. The energy was not created or destroyed. It just went from food to heat. It just changed form. The lightsaber, however, appears to create energy, because how else would the blade be able to cycle? I'm no expert on physics, so I cannot tell you if there are any examples of the first law of thermodynamics being broken, or even if it's theoretically possible. However, I can assume that this law can't be broken by any methods we have here on Earth, even in the galaxy. So how is it that lightsabers work if they can't break this law? Well, they can't. They have to break this law. What I think is that every time a particle from the beam hits something, it creates energy. That's how the lightsaber is able to produce heat, light, and sound without losing any energy. Where does the energy come from? Well, it comes from the one thing that Star Wars has that Earth does not: the Force. The Force is a complex topic that I will not get into today, that's for a future video. However, the Force has been described as an infinite source of power for multiple canon and legend sources, so I can assume that that is correct. And this makes sense. Thousands of Jedi and thousands of Sith are able to call on the Force at the same time to do miraculous things, and the Force never runs out of steam. It never loses power. If we assume that this is right, that the Force is an infinite source of energy, then it makes sense that the Force would give the lightsaber all the energy it needs, since it's the only thing in the universe that could do so. So, the Force is an infinite source of power that breaks laws of physics and powers lightsabers? Sounds about right. But if it's an infinite source of power, then does that mean that there is an unlimited amount of energy available in Star Wars? I guess that's a topic for another video. This is Star Wars Nerds and Geeks signing off. See you all next time.